I've been running a lot of raids recently and have consistently been outputting high DPS even while on support roles like Tractor. In fact, more often than not, I specifically request to be the Tractor player because it goes so well with the build that I'm about to show you. And with people coming into the stream, I've got a lot of questions about the build and what goes into it. So today I'm going to answer those questions by showing you my most used DPS Titan build for raids and dungeons that also doubles as a strong build in general. You can use it anywhere, it's just that it shines the most in content with bosses. And I do strongly recommend trying it, especially given the prevalence of the Notswap modifier these days, forcing you onto one exotic or just basically one build in general. And with today's setup, it is basically completely future-proof for situations like that. So if you enjoy today's build, then your like and subscription would be very much appreciated. So today's build is going to revolve around the Peacekeeper's exotic boots for the Titan, because they have received a bunch of changes over the years and they are very solid for both neutral game and damage. So what do they do? Well, the main trait Mecha Holster states that while wielding a submachine gun, handling, airborne effectiveness, and movement are all improved, and damage against combatants will increase the longer you remain on a target. Submachine guns are reloaded when stowed. So essentially what this means is that your SMGs are super boosted. They have really good stats and they do a lot of damage if you ramp it up by using the exotic perk. Now, if you aren't familiar with the exotic perk, basically dealing damage with an SMG will give me that damage boost on the left of my screen, and that only lasts for around a second before falling off, and when it is at the maximum stacks of 20, it is a double damage boost. So especially if you combine it with new SMGs like the M17 Fast Talker here, which is going to be the other main centerpiece of the build, you're going to be dealing a lot more damage with your primary weapons than you normally would be if you weren't using Peacekeepers. So speak of the devil, we are going to be using the M17 Fast Talker. Now this is the brand new balanced heat SMG from the Renegades expansion, and it is by far the best SMG to use with Peacekeepers, no questions asked. There is absolutely zero other competition in the game at the moment. So just to show you what I mean, I'm going to equip a standard SMG here, non-heat. This is an Immortal from Trials, also has target lock, and as you can see in game, this has a magazine size of 37, and I can shoot it at Carl and it'll do like a decent amount of damage, but it only has 37 in the mag, and by the time that I'm reloaded, the damage bonus from PKs has already fallen off. Now, let's take a look at the God Roll M17 Fast Talker, and just take a look at how long I'm able to fire this thing. Still going. That, I'd have to, I don't know how many bullets that actually was, but it is probably, I want to say triple of what the Immortal was doing. So bottom line, you are shooting a lot of bullets with this thing. Well, why is that? Well, for starters, we have a very important magazine perk, which is going to be ionized heatsink. This perk is going to make it so the heat generated stat on your weapon is lower. So if I turn it off, this is going to go to 16. And basically what this stat is the amount of heat that is generated every time that you shoot a singular bullet from this weapon. Ionized heatsink is going to reduce that to the absolute minimum. And what this means is that you are going to be able to shoot more bullets. So without ionized heatsink, you're going to overheat faster. With it, you're going to be able to shoot the weapon for longer. Then we are going to be also combining that with the accelerated assault origin trait. Yes, this is on a shiny version of the weapon. This one is going to make it so dealing sustained damage with this weapon loads slightly more ammo from reserves or removes more heat. So it is another way of removing heat from the weapon as we are firing it. So combine these two perks together, you're going to be able to fire the SMG for far longer than you normally would. This weapon also gets target lock, which is going to be able to increase the damage of our shots. And in the left column, it actually doesn't matter what you get really. You can get attrition orbs in this column, which will allow you to make orbs for your teammates when you are dealing consistent damage to like a boss, for example. However, it really doesn't matter. If you end up getting a role like me, where you have ionized, you have target lock, and you have accelerated assault, that is all you need to worry about. You could try going for a role with attrition orbs, but you really don't need it. I've just gone for dynamic sway reduction here, which actually feels quite nice. It reduces the recoil a fair bit. Also, top tip, when using a heat weapon that you want to fire for a long time, use the enhanced heat generated mod. This mod is very important because if I take it off, my heat generated goes up to 14, but if I put it back on, it goes down to 12. So make sure you have this mod on because it's going to allow you to shoot even more bullets combined with everything else on the weapon. And by the way, if you are looking to farm a god roll of this weapon yourself, you can do so by completing the weekly territory quest that you get from Spider. You get one per character. Completing it on one character will auto complete it for all of them, and those quests guarantee a shiny every week. They will be given to you every Tuesday. You can also buy M17 Fast fast talkers from the fast talker vendor in Tharsis, and you can also convert salvage into weapons for a random chance at getting the fast talker. Fingers crossed for those shiny drops. So enough talk, how does this actually look in practice? Well, one of the main things that this build is really good at is that it allows your support players, such as those using tractor cannon, to do very good support DPS. It makes their role not as detrimental because it gives them a supporting damage option that allows them to basically bring their damage closer to the main damage dealers of your team, which will not be using tractor cannon. A model rotation would look something like this. I would pop my Transcendence, I would go into tractor here, then we'd go into a nade, go Thunder Crash, retractor, and then the nice thing about this rotation is that when you get to high heat on your SMG, it's about to happen here in maybe 1 or 2 seconds. As soon as you hear the beep beep there, swap back to tractor, back to the SMG, and that is basically the full duration of the tractor. It works out really nicely for, you know, getting the timing down. And I use my Thunder Crash again. Obviously, pay attention to how quickly I am getting my super back, because that's one of the main strengths of having a PK's build is just look at my super bar. I'm generating a ton of super. This is about to be my 3rd Thunder Crash, and actually I'm going to call it here. That's where we're going to stop. Got my Transcendence back. We've got around 3,100, 3,200 DPS with about 120,000 total damage, which is really solid for your tractor player. I'm not even kidding. This is very, very good for your tractor person. Normally, in a raid or a dungeon, you are going to relegate the tractor role to like your warlock, your wellcaster, for example. But if you have a Titan on your team and the boss allows for it, I would strongly recommend trying your Titan do this instead, because chances are they can crank more than your solar warlock can, purely because they have access to Thunder Crash. They have access to 200 super Thunder Crash. They have the SMG. They have the Peacekeepers. They're going to be putting out a bunch of supers. So definitely going to be more than your solar warlocks. So very solid support role. Also, another tip that I have for you is a specific fragment works really well with tractor cannon, and that is Facet of Command. This one is going to make it so freezing or suppressing a target reloads your equipped weapon. And what does tractor cannon do? Well, tractor suppresses your target. In fact, I'm just going to get rid of a few shots here. And then if I hit Carl with tractor, it's going to reload itself, as you can see in the bottom left-hand corner. And this is only on like a short 4-second cooldown, which basically means that every time you swap back to tractor to reapply it, you are never going to have to worry about reloading it, because doing so will instantly reload the magazine because of Facet of Command. And a thing about Prismatic Titan is that you basically only need 2 fragments that are absolutely mandatory, those being Protection and Courage. The rest are kind of free ball. You can do what you want with them. We'll get more into the fragments in just a second, but that is the main thing. A very nice quality of life fragment to just have your tractor always reloaded in the background. So before we get into anything subclass related, I do want to finish up by talking about stats here, because your stats are very important for this build, especially in a Notswap world. If you are more of a competitive raider and you want to take builds like this into contest dungeons or contest raids, your stat split is going to be very important for that, because you need to strike a balance between damage and neutral game. And thankfully, this build does both. What are we doing here? We are running 160 weapons and 150 super. These stats are basically the 2 most meta stats in the game. If you remember back before Edge of Fate, you basically had Resilience and Discipline, which were the most meta. Well, in this new day and age, we have super and weapons, which are the most meta. Everything else is kind of secondary. So why 160 weapons and why 150 super? Well, we'll talk about the super first, and that is that actually a lot of your damage from this rotation comes from your super. In fact, if I sort of play back the clip from earlier where I was getting 3 supers off with the PKs, where I demoed the rotation, if you take that damage split, it was around 120,000 damage. Over 60,000 of that damage is going to come from the super. So over half of your total damage throughout the whole rotation is going to be from your super. So that's why having high super is very important. We have 150 here. Do not go any higher than 150 if you can help it, because on our damage loadouts, we are going to have 3 super fonts on our helmet, which is going to give plus 50 super stat whenever we're holding armor charge, and that'll bump us all the way up to the maximum 200, which at that point is a 45% damage increase to our super. After that, pour the rest into weapons, because obviously 2 benefits from the weapon stat. The first is that it's going to increase the damage of our weapons against bosses, and it's going to be more for primary weapons. Primary and special weapons go up to 15% at 200 weapons, and at 160 here, as you can see, mine is at 8.9%, which is pretty good. Secondly, it also makes it so when you get kills, you have a chance to create an enhanced ammo brick, which is double sized for special ammo, or like 33% bigger for heavy ammo. So with 160 weapons, this is a 60% 50% chance to generate that brick, which is going to be very good for ammo economy. Our secondary weapon of choice is going to be the Titan rocket pulse because, you know, it's a rocket pulse. They are stinking overpowered. Haven't been nerfed yet as of the making of this video. They still do quite a lot of damage, but of course it is mostly necessary for the damage component of the setup. After that, I have 100 grenade because that is just the consequence of running so many gunner pieces, because grenade is the secondary stat on that archetype, so there's no avoiding it. I've also gone for 55 melee because that is the minimum that I want for the actual neutral game portion of the build, which we will get to in a second. Overall, what are the pieces that allowed me to get this distribution? My helmet is a gunner with a tertiary stat in super and a tuning in weapons. My gauntlets are again gunner with a tertiary stat in super and a tuning in super. My chest piece is gunner with a tertiary stat in super and a tuning in super. My peacekeepers are gunner with a tertiary stat in super. And finally, something different. My class item is paragon with a tertiary stat in weapons and a tuning in weapons. This is where the majority of my melee stat comes from. It is the paragon here. However, if you wanted to sacrifice more melee stat and gain more weapons, you could go for a 5th gunner piece, but I probably wouldn't recommend it. So now onto the subclass. Admittedly, not as important as the rest of the build, but it is important to have a strong neutral game component, and Titan does that very well, thankfully. So we are going to be on Prismatic, of course, with the Thunder Crash Super. Then for the rest of our abilities, I quite like using Thruster here, but you could go for Barricade if you are versing a boss that does a lot of splash damage, like Templar, for example. I know he's not particularly lethal anymore these days, but you know, something to consider. For the melee, we are taking Frenzied Blade, number 1, because it gives us 3 charges, and number 2, because we are combining it with the Consecration aspect. But quickly before we go there, the last grenade we have is the Shackle Grenade. Shackle Grenade is my preferred darkness grenade option. I am a Titan main, and if you want my recommendation, do not use a light grenade. Do not use Pulse, Thermite, or Suppressor Grenade. With any of your Prismatic builds, you are much better off using a darkness grenade, either your choice between Glacier or Shackle. I just tend to like Shackle because of the instant unstop stun if you are versing them, and it also is pretty good for dark energy if you throw it into a group. Then for the aspects, we have the classic Knockout Consecration. Despite all of the nerfs, I think it's maybe 5 nerfs over the course of a year to Consecration, Knockout, Ignitions, everything. Surprise, surprise, it is still a very good, in fact, the best option for neutral game for Titans still. So we are going to be getting healing and amplified from Knockout whenever we get kills with our melees, which include Consecration, and then Consecration is just going to be that AoE add clear masterclass aspect. The classic, anyone who's a Titan who's watching this knows how strong it is. We're just using those 2. Fragments, like I said earlier, the only 2 fragments, I'm kind of letting you in on a secret here. Even if I wasn't using Facet of Ruin or Facet of Command, this build would still be just as strong. The only 2 fragments that you need for Prismatic Titan in 2026 are Protection and Courage. Everything else is secondary. Could make an argument for balance if you're using like a class item, but honestly, exotic class items, they're very 2025. They're out of fashion. So Protection for the 15% damage resist when you are surrounded by combatants. Courage for the 10% increased ability damage versus dark debuff targets. So this is going to apply to your Thunder Crash. That's why at the beginning you saw me throwing my Transcendent Grenade at the floor to apply suspension to Carl, so I could benefit from that with my Thunder Crash. Then Facet of Ruin, the only reason that I am taking Facet of Ruin is for the +10 weapons, because again, like I said, these 2 fragments here are like free slots. It's up to you what you want to take. It does increase the size of the ignitions that I make with Consecration, but that's not really that consequential. Then finally, Facet of Command, like I explained earlier, to give you that quality of life reloads for your tractor cannon. Now for the armor set bonuses that I'm using for this build, the first one is going to be Ion Adapter, which you can earn from Mythic Kepler. This one is going to make it so when you get kills with rocket pulses, which is going to be the Sai Eterna, you are going to get a 20% splash damage reduction, which is pretty good. Then we are going to go with the 2-piece Ferropotent, which you can earn from current solo, fireteam, or arena ops activities in Renegades, which is going to make it so when you heal, you are going to be gaining 10% damage resist, or the classic resist ×1 every time you heal. This is going to work with Knockout. This is going to work with Natural Regen. It's just a very strong armor set, and if you are not using this on any of your builds, then please make sure you do. It is a very meta set bonus. So Ion Adapter 2-piece and Ferropotent 2-piece. Now, of course, the main highlight of today's build has been the Tractor setup. However, if there was somebody else on your team who was using Tractor, you can still use this setup with something like a Finalities Augur and still output some solid DPS. In fact, I'm just going to show you what that looks like here. I'm going to proc bait and switch here, and then I'm just going to play into Carl with my SMG. And actually, the timing here also does work out quite nicely, where if I actually let the SMG fully overheat this time, then swap, do a couple shots of the Rocket Pulse, then go back to my SMG, it is going to work out again where I can get my super back, maintain the bait and switch timer, make that, make sure that's all kept up. And I'm going to get a new turret here, paint Carl again. And it's going to be a similar amount of DPS. As you can see at the top, we have around 25,000, 80k total, which is okay. Like I said, it is an alternative you can use. However, if there is somebody else on your team who is using tractor cannon, you didn't manage to steal it off them, I would still recommend going for a setup for damage as a Titan with Curus instead, because the burst damage from this is going to be a lot higher. Again, just as a quick showcase to show you what I mean, I'm going to just paint Carl here, do my nade, my 200 super Curus Thunder Crash, proc bait. As you can see at the top, we are starting at 7k DPS. That is going to fall off pretty rapidly, but it is better than with PKs. It is just your classic Finalities Augur mint rotation thing. I was actually thinking of making a video about how to properly use mint and Finalities Augur rotations together. Let me know down in the comments if that's something you'd like to see, if you just recently acquired Finalities Augur and you want to know how to use it properly, things like that. Bottom line is that the PK's build here is definitely more catered towards the support player. However, you can use it if you are not the support player, if you just really like using SMGs and PKs, for example. Okay, so now we're going to be wrapping up with the armor mods for this build, and this is going to be for the damage setup portion of the build. I will show the links for the neutral game portion at the end, but just for now, for the DPS setup, for the helmet, we are taking 3 copies of Super Font, because that is going to give us plus 50 super, and on top of the natural 150 that we have, that'll put us all the way up to 200. For the gloves, I am going for 2 grenade fonts to boost my grenade above 100 a little bit, so that it does a little bit more damage. Then a arc loader for my rocket pulse. For the chest piece, it is just general resist mods like usual. And for the boots, I have triple stasis surge, which is going to increase the damage of my M17 fast talker by 22%, which is very nice. Then finally, for the class item, I have a single powerful attraction and 2 copies of time dilation to increase the duration of my surges to the maximum. Here is a quick showcase of the mods that I have on the running setup for my build. We just have a couple finders, a siphon, a couple heavy handers here to make orbs with my consecrations, resist mods, got a stack some stacks here, stasis weapon surge, harmonic scavenger or arc scavenger in this case, time dilation, a special finisher, powerful attraction, the usual. These are all going to be in the link in the description though, so don't worry about that. So overall, this build is incredibly solid and it is very future-proof and can output some serious DPS alongside supporting your team. The neutral game is also really good with the classic Titan consecration loop, and it's completely non-artifact dependent. If you didn't notice, we didn't talk about the artifact at all in this video, and that's because it doesn't need it. So you can use this forever as long as the M17 fast talker stays where it is. As long as they don't nerf super gen in any way, you are going to be able to use this build effectively in any raid or dungeon content, assuming the boss allows for it, and you are going to do very well, and your team is going to thank you for it. As always, the link to this build is going to be down in the description box below, and if you want to copy the fashion, just take a look here. This is a attempt at a Siva look that I have gone for. I don't really think there's much else you can do with PKs. I haven't really seen that much more inspiration. I think this one looks pretty good, but let me know down in the comments if I've cooked or not. But that is going to bring us to the end of the video. So if you enjoyed the build, then your like and subscription would be very much appreciated, and I will see you in the next one. Goodbye for now, dear viewer.